The Horse Player Now team of Joe Christofek and Brian W. Spencer joining you for another edition of Night School. And Brian, last week we shipped up from Chicago, and we've had a very successful early stage of the Keeneland meet, and that ties into what our topic is this week on Night School. It's all about shippers, horses traveling from one circuit to another.
Sure, and you can get a big leg up when you're following one individual circuit, say how we follow Arlington every summer. But then you get to a place like Keeneland and you've got horses shipping in from Turfway, Saratoga, Ellis, Arlington, countless other racetracks, and there's a lot of different ways you can go about approaching how to handicap those horses where they fit in a race like today's at Keeneland.
Especially early in a meet, because horses are coming from everywhere where you don't have the familiarity necessarily. Now we have local circuits where in Kentucky, it's Keeneland and Churchill and Turfway and Ellis Park. So there's some familiarity with the horses and with the trainers and which tracks they may do better at. And it's very important to note which horses may be better over one course than they are over another course, even if it's on the same circuit.
Well, and especially, too, if we were even talking about synthetic racetracks. You know, there's Polytrack at Arlington, Polytrack here at Keeneland, and they may not play exactly the same. Horses may not appreciate one as much as they appreciate the other. So you also can always look at that little, section in the statistics box to find out if you have a horse for the course. There are some horses who ship into Keeneland reliably every meet, and they just crush here. They dominate because they love this track, and they find the right conditions when they're shipping in.
Now, a couple of weeks ago on Night School, we talked about Polytrack and synthetics. Now, at Keeneland, we have a Polytrack. At Turfway, they have a Polytrack. At Churchill, they have dirt. At Ellis, they have dirt. I think the polycapping databases that a lot of these racetracks offer can give you a sense of where the winners are coming from in the various conditions. We've noticed here at Keeneland, Presque Isle shippers and the mid-level claimers do very well. Saratoga and Belmont turf horses coming to Keeneland do very well because those races are very strong. So use every piece of information at your disposal in order to come up with the most logical horses in each individual race.
Absolutely, and we always talk about how in this game you have to put in your homework, you have to put in your time, and if you're handicapping races at a track that does offer a polycapping database, there's almost, I think, no better way you can spend your time because it's going to show you where the horses are coming from, where they made their last start. You can sort it by class level, surface, distance. That is invaluable. They have them at Arlington, Keeneland, and probably a couple other places.
Now, as far as the trainers go, Spence, it's a different game in 2012 because you have super trainers that may have as many as 120, 150 horses that they're responsible for, and there are condition books from every track all over the country, different class levels. It's a trainer's job nowadays, especially if they have a huge stable like a Todd Pletcher, a Steve Asmussen, a Mike Maker, even a Kellen Gorder, to pick the absolute best spot for their horse.
And when you're running an operation that big, you're going to have condition books from every track, so you really have to pay attention to those barns. Todd Pletcher is not going to ship his horses in from Saratoga to Keeneland just for the fun of it. It's because he's found a spot that he loves. And same goes with all of those other trainers with those expansive operations that cover track to track to track, several thousands of miles apart. So pay close attention to those because they're probably not doing it just for the scenery change.
Trainers have assistant trainers that they talk to. They sit around with the condition books. They talk about the horse, what that horse needs experience-wise, class-wise, distance-wise, surface-wise, and they can pick out the absolute best spot for that horse. If you see a Todd Pletcher horse that's debuting at Delaware, maybe they're not as high on that horse as they would be if the horse was debuting at Saratoga. So those are some of the things that you need to take into consideration when you're handicapping the races and trying to pick out value and horses that are live, whether you're playing the multi-race wagers or an intra-race wager.
I totally agree, and especially in those multi-race wagers, which everybody knows I'm a big fan of. If you can get any of those angles, let's talk about the Presque Isle shippers here at Keeneland. They were just running their eyeballs out last season. They're doing the same thing again this season, and they're still not getting bet. I mean, those horses are running second, paying $18 to place. That's where you can try to, make your big scores for the meet, and one of them gets over the top at 15-1, and you're looking at a pretty handsome pick four.
One of the most challenging meets, I think, Spence, is the Gulfstream winter and spring meet because you have horses coming in from Calder, you have horses coming in from New York, you have varying class levels from lower level claimers, maiden claimers, upwards to the graded stakes types where these horses are hopefully trying to develop in their career and move up the class ladder. Gulfstream in the winter can be very challenging.
Mm-hmm. And you're also going to see, we're standing here at Keeneland, so I'm really focusing on that here, but you see a lot of these NYRA shippers, these horses coming from Saratoga. They dominate those entry-level turf allowances. I know that stat courtesy of Jeremy Plonk. So, those are the kind of things you want to look at. Not all shippers are created equally, and you know that not all entry-level allowance types are going to be created equally coming from, let's say, New York versus maybe Turfway.
It's important to know the class of the track, the strength of the races within that racetrack when you're evaluating shippers from track to track, and also the differences in the distance, the surfaces, and so on and so forth. For Brian W. Spencer, I'm Joe Christofek. Tonight on Night School, it's all about shippers.